Gutenberg's Gift by Nancy Willard, illustrated by Bryan Leister. We have a little pop-up example over here, and we also have another one right here. "500 years before this book, a printer lived, of modest fame, Johannes Gutenberg by name. He loved all letters, loved the hook and dip of J, the peak of A. He loved the forward-stepping K, the knees of M, the comb of E, the hidden valley carved by V, and the deep serving bowl of U. Books, too, he loved, though he owned none. To his wife Anna he complained, 'Books are so rare and readers few.' All books were copied, one by one, and kept in cases closely chained." And here we can have an example of how books were copied out before the printing press. And here's Johannes Gutenberg and Anna. "I'd love to hold my printed name," said Anna. Johann smiled and took 4 blocks of wood and carved her name. He inked and pressed them to the page and dreamed of making her a book. Each letter on a separate block, I could print other words. With string, I'll bind them into lines and lock wood into words for everything. He piled his letters on the table and ran his fingers through the heap. "Someday I'll print the Holy Bible for Christmas, Anna. You shall have a Bible of your own to keep." She shook her head. "Johann, my dear, it can't be done in 50 years. Here she is shaking her head. And here is Johannes Gutenberg carving a letter. "Though gold is scarce and times are lean, I dream of building a machine, a bed of type, a wheel to wake it. I'll ask a carpenter to make it." And here we see the carpenter building. "And when the press was done, he said, 'This printing press has cost me dear, but wooden letters break and blur. Let's cast our own words in stronger stuff, though iron is clearly hard enough. It tears the paper, maybe lead.' The young apprentice shook his head. 'Many a Christmas, sir, will pass before we finish such a task.' Johann exclaimed, 'Good work takes time. We'll cut the alphabet in lead.'" And here we have Johann putting metal into a type mold so he can make type. And here we have this young apprentice stoking the fire. And letter by letter, line by line, he linked the letters, filled the frame, dipped a felt ball into ink, and swabbed each letter. Every chink and loop and corner glistened black. He laid the paper smooth and pressed the heavy platen to its back, raised it and pulled away the page. The stout apprentice said, "Look here! Why, every letter's crisp and clear." Johann gave a joyful cry. "Next Christmas Eve, Anna will have a Bible of her own to keep." They hung the pages up to dry, too tired to talk, too glad to sleep. And here we have Gutenberg with his type case, with all of the type in there. And this is a model of the common press, which is the kind of press that Gutenberg made. And the way it works is that 2 people beat the ink so it covers the type here, and there's a piece of paper here, and then they put the piece of paper down onto the ink surface, and then we go ahead and press down. After you press down, you pull it back, and there you have ink on the page. Pretty brilliant. The birds withdrew, the summer fled, but Johann would not go to bed. He inked and printed night and day till the last page was put away. On Christmas Eve the snow fell deep on shape and shadow, cloak and dress, as if the drifts were unbound sheets, and the dark sky a printing press. Holding the Bible to his breast, he settled in his favorite chair, meaning to take the briefest rest. And on this page, we can see all of the typed pages, the printed pages he has here are hung up. Here's our Johann with this Bible on his breast. And then here, we have a little kitty sleeping. Good Anna, finding him asleep, shook him awake with shouts of glee. Oh, what a gift you have given me! Open our shutters to the sun, you shall make books for everyone. Dear love, wake up, it's Christmas morn. They called the neighbors in to look. 500 years before this book you're holding in your hands was born. And here are our neighbors coming in to have a look. And back here you can see this is the Bible he printed. All right, the end. So as you may remember from the beginning of the book, the book talks about how people were writing books out by hand, and this is an example of this. So usually these books would be made by monks or nuns, and you can see how beautiful and intricate their work is. You can see, for example, all of this little detail of the gold leafing in here that helps you figure out where exactly you are, which sentence is which. So this is produced at the same time as when Gutenberg was printing, but as you can see, there were still some people who were writing in manuscript, handwriting things out, as opposed to printing them. And the printing revolution takes a little bit of time to catch on. So what are we looking at? This is a typecase. And this is not exactly what Gutenberg would have used, although there are plenty of modern day printers, we call them fine press printers, who are printing using lead typing. So this is a piece of lead type. And, or if you were a printer, you would call it a sort. And printing has actually given us a lot of terms in the English language, a lot of expressions. So you may have heard the one about someone being out of sorts, right? They're just not in a good mood. And it comes from printing. So if you were, for example, doing a really large book that took a lot of ease, you might run out of ease. So then you would be out of sorts. So how do you put a book together using lead typing? Well, you use this, and it's called the composing stick. And you hold it like this in your left hand so that your thumb can move back and forth. And this is important because, and I'll demonstrate by building a piece of lined type. So you see I'm holding it here, and I'm just going to slot these pieces in. And we have the name Gutenberg here in lead type. So you build up type piece by piece, word by word, line by line. And that's how you make a book eventually. But you may notice here we have an uppercase letter and then a bunch of lowercase letters. You may know that this also comes from printing, because this is our uppercase of our typecase, and this is our lowercase. Also, you may have heard the expression, mind your P's and Q's, right? Look at them. They look pretty similar, right? It would be kind of hard if you were going really fast trying to put things together to know which one was which, and you would only know until you ink it and press it onto the page so that it was right side up to you. Well, that's why you need to mind your P's and Q's. So we talked about composing type, but what does it look like when you have it all together? Well, it looks a little something like this. All together, we call this a form of type, but let's break down what's happening here. So this outer metal frame is called the chase. Inside here we have our set type, and you can see it's really tight in here. How did that happen? Well, we have these things, these pieces of wood, and we call them furniture because we set it around this piece, this type block, to get it in the right place. And you can see there are 4 of them, which means that somebody is thinking about printing 4 pages at once. This is not what happened with the Gutenberg Bible. The Gutenberg Bible would have taken up this whole structure. So what we have here is a fragment of a piece printed by William Caxton. And this comes from the Golden Legend, which is a story about famous saints in Christianity. And what's really great about this is that William Caxton was printing right after Gutenberg, and this is all metal type like Gutenberg, and it's all in English. Now it's an older English, so it's a little bit hard to read, but nevertheless, it's a really great item of printing history. Okay, so while we can't show you a Gutenberg Bible, we do have something that's really special, and this is what's sort of commonly known as the Nuremberg Chronicle. Its real name is Liber Chronicarium, which means a history of the world. And it was written by Hartmann Schlegel. It was printed in Nuremberg in 1493, and the printer was Anton Koberger. So let's take a look inside. All right, so here we have German lettering. This book was produced in Latin and in German. Gutenberg's Bible was only produced in Latin, even though it was also printed in a German-speaking country. And this is a really great example of how, even though we have printing starting to happen, we still have a love for manuscripts. Do you remember that manuscript we saw earlier? The same kind of techniques are being used to create this initial that starts off this line. So this book is really wonderful because it has a bunch of illustrations inside of it. And let's have a look. So as we talked about, it's a history of the world, but it's a history of the world starting with the Christian Bible, basically. So here we have God, here we have a bunch of angels, and here we have God making the world. This is the hand of God, and he's making circles. Let's see what those circles make. Here are some stars, and here's the beginning of a landscape, sort of seen upside down. And this is Eden, and here's God making Adam. And then this is the world that he makes. But as I said, this is a history of the world starting with the Bible. So here we have all of Adam and Eve's children and their children, and this whole history of their family, which is seen through this great example of sort of like roots of a tree or branches of a tree connecting people, right? Like a family tree. Let's keep going through this. Well, this is pretty fun. These are all sorts of people that you would not typically see, but maybe people at the time in 1493 believed existed, right? So this is what's called a monopod, somebody who only has one leg. or a cyclops. And this book is really famous because it has all of these great illustrations of cities. So if you weren't able to travel, maybe you could look inside of this book and see all the cities that were being built, all the great cities of the time. All right, we hope you enjoyed this video on the history of printing and Gutenberg's Bible.